When you think of Hollywood directors, you might picture explosive tempers, legendary feuds, and egos the size of movie screens. Names like Stanley Kubrick, demanding perfection through endless takes. David O. Russell, whose on-set shouting matches became industry legend. Or Alfred Hitchcock, who famously tortured his leading ladies. But there's one director who breaks every stereotype about Hollywood power players. A man who spent 55 years in the entertainment industry without burning a single bridge, without a single public feud, without ever being called difficult by anyone who worked with him. That director is Ron Howard. And his story is far more interesting than any fabricated controversy could ever be. Ron Howard's journey from child actor to Oscar-winning director isn't just a success story. It's a masterclass in how to navigate one of the world's most cutthroat industries while maintaining your integrity, your relationships, and your reputation. In an industry where feuds are currency and drama sells magazines, Howard has done something truly remarkable. He's built a multi-billion-dollar filmography while being genuinely liked by almost everyone he's ever worked with. But here's what makes this story fascinating. Being nice doesn't mean being soft. Being professional doesn't mean avoiding conflict. And maintaining positive relationships doesn't mean compromising your vision. Ron Howard's career reveals something Hollywood doesn't often talk about, that respect, preparation, and clear communication can be more powerful than fear and intimidation. Let's start at the beginning, because understanding Ron Howard the director requires understanding Ron Howard the child actor, and the lessons he learned long before he ever called action on a film set. Born in Duncan, Oklahoma in 1954, Ronald William Howard was performing before he could fully understand what performance meant. His parents, Rance and Jean Howard, were both actors, which meant young Ron grew up in a world where make-believe was the family business. But unlike so many child stars whose stories end in tragedy, addiction, or bitter resentment, Ron Howard's childhood in Hollywood was marked by something rare: stability, guidance, and parents who prioritized his well-being over his earnings. When Ron was cast as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show in 1960, he was just 6 years old. For 8 seasons, from 1960 to 1968, millions of Americans watched him grow up on screen, the freckled, innocent son of small-town Sheriff Andy Taylor. But what audiences didn't see were the adult problems happening behind the scenes. Years later, Howard would reveal that even as a child, he witnessed tensions on set, ego clashes, and what he called ugliness between adult cast members. He saw firsthand how egos could poison a workplace, how professional jealousy could turn colleagues into enemies, and how the pressure of success could bring out the worst in people. But he also saw the opposite. Andy Griffith himself became a mentor to young Ron, demonstrating professionalism, preparation, and respect for the craft. Griffith treated the young actor not as a prop or a paycheck, but as a fellow professional deserving of guidance and respect. Don Knotts showed him that comedy required the same discipline as drama. These weren't just acting lessons. They were life lessons about how to conduct yourself in a professional environment, lessons that would shape Howard's entire approach to directing decades later. When The Andy Griffith Show ended, Ron Howard didn't disappear like so many child actors. Instead, he transitioned to another iconic role, Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, which ran from 1974 to 1984. Again, he was the wholesome, all-American everyman, the character audiences trusted and rooted for. But by this point, Howard was already looking beyond acting. He was watching directors work, asking questions, learning the technical side of filmmaking. He was studying how directors communicated with actors, how they solved problems on set, how they handled pressure from studios and producers. His directorial debut came in 1977 with Grand Theft Auto, a low-budget action comedy that he also starred in. He was 23 years old, and while the film wasn't a critical darling, it was profitable, which in Hollywood is sometimes more important. More importantly, it proved Howard could handle the pressure of directing. He could manage a set, work with actors, solve technical problems, and deliver a finished product on time and on budget. These aren't glamorous skills, but they're the foundation of a sustainable directing career. What followed was a steady climb through increasingly ambitious projects. Night Shift in 1982 introduced audiences to Michael Keaton's manic energy. Splash in 1984, a romantic comedy about a man who falls in love with a mermaid, became a surprise hit and established Howard as a director who could balance heart, humor, and commercial appeal. Cocoon in 1985 dealt with aging and mortality through a science fiction lens, showing Howard could handle deeper themes without losing entertainment value. But it was Apollo 13 in 1995 that really demonstrated what Ron Howard could do as a director. Here was a true story that everyone already knew the ending to. Everyone knew the astronauts survived. There was no mystery about whether they'd make it home. Yet Howard crafted a film so tense, so technically precise, and so emotionally resonant that audiences sat on the edge of their seats despite knowing exactly how it ended. The film earned 9 Academy Award nominations and cemented Howard's reputation as a director who could handle massive technical challenges while never losing sight of the human story at the center. Working with Tom Hanks on Apollo 13 began a professional relationship that would span decades and multiple films. Hanks would later work with Howard on The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and Inferno. But this wasn't just a director repeatedly casting the same star. It was a collaboration between two professionals who respected each other's process, trusted each other's instincts, and genuinely enjoyed working together. Hanks has repeatedly praised Howard's directing style, describing him as prepared, collaborative, and focused on creating an environment where actors can do their best work. Then came A Beautiful Mind in 2001, the film that would win Ron Howard the Academy Award for Best Director. The story of mathematician John Nash's struggle with schizophrenia required delicate handling. The film needed to take audiences inside Nash's mind, making us experience his delusions without losing track of reality. It required Russell Crowe to deliver a nuanced, vulnerable performance unlike anything he'd done before. And it required Howard to balance the intense psychological drama with the love story between Nash and his wife Alicia, played by Jennifer Connelly. The film won 4 Academy Awards including Best Picture and Best Director. But perhaps more impressive than the awards was how Howard handled the responsibility of telling a real person's story. He worked closely with John Nash and Alicia Nash, respecting their input while maintaining his artistic vision. He created a film that honored their experience without exploiting it. This careful balance between artistic vision and ethical responsibility has characterized Howard's approach to filmmaking throughout his career. Now let's talk about what makes Ron Howard's directing style unique, because understanding his approach explains why actors consistently want to work with him, why crews respect him, and why his films, even when they're not critical favorites, are almost always professionally executed and commercially viable. First, Howard is prepared. Obsessively prepared. Before filming begins, he's done extensive research, worked through the script countless times, discussed character motivations with actors, and planned shot sequences with his cinematographer. This preparation doesn't mean rigidity. It means he's thought through enough possibilities that he can adapt quickly when circumstances change, when an actor brings a different interpretation, or when weather or technical issues force adjustments. In an interview about In the Heart of the Sea, a 2015 film about the whaling disaster that inspired Moby Dick, Howard discussed his approach to working with actors. The film required the cast, including Chris Hemsworth, to endure grueling physical conditions. They filmed on the water off the Canary Islands, spending hours in small boats under the blazing sun. The actors had to follow extreme diet and exercise regimens to portray starving sailors realistically. These weren't comfortable film set conditions. This was genuinely difficult, physically demanding work. Howard's approach wasn't to coddle the actors or try to make everything easy. As he explained to Backstage magazine, these actors could never be coddled. At the end of the day, we had to get this work done. Their job is to show up and be ready and try to be great. That expectation is always there. I try to support and I try to clear away as many obstacles as I possibly can, but I acknowledge and they recognize that I can't clear them all away. That's part of being a film actor. This philosophy reveals something important about Howard's directing style. He has high expectations, but is also realistic about the challenges of filmmaking. He doesn't pretend difficulties don't exist, but he also doesn't use difficulties as excuses. He expects actors to be professional, to be prepared, to handle discomfort when necessary. But in return, he provides support, clear direction, and an environment where actors feel respected and heard. Chris Hemsworth, who worked with Howard on both Rush and In the Heart of the Sea, has spoken about how Howard creates a collaborative environment. Howard doesn't dictate every gesture and inflection. Instead, he provides a framework, discusses the character's motivations and the scene's objectives, and then trusts the actor to find their way into the performance. This approach requires confidence from the director. It means accepting that actors might make choices you didn't anticipate, that they might interpret scenes differently than you initially envisioned. But it also means getting performances that feel authentic rather than mechanical, because actors are truly inhabiting characters rather than just following directions. Daniel Bruhl, who starred opposite Hemsworth in Rush, Howard's 2013 film about the rivalry between Formula One drivers James Hunt and Niki Lauda, described Howard as someone who creates calm on set even when filming dangerous racing sequences. The film required extensive practical racing footage, cars traveling at high speeds, crashes that needed to look authentic. These are inherently stressful sequences to film, where safety concerns must be balanced against the need for spectacular visuals. Yet Bruhl and other cast members described Howard as maintaining a steady, focused presence that helped everyone else stay calm and professional. This ability to maintain composure under pressure isn't just a personality trait. It's a professional skill that Howard developed over decades. Remember, he started in this industry at age 6. By the time he started directing, he'd already spent nearly 20 years on film and television sets. He'd seen how chaos develops, how small problems cascade into major crises, and how a director's energy, whether calm or panicked, focused or scattered, affects everyone else's performance. Let's talk about some of the specific challenges Howard has faced during his career, because these stories reveal how he handles conflict, solves problems, and maintains relationships even when circumstances are difficult. When Howard took over directing Solo, a Star Wars story in 2017, he walked into one of the most challenging situations any director can face, replacing another director mid-production. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller had been fired after shooting much of the film, with Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy and producer Lawrence Kasdan reportedly unhappy with their improvisational, comedic approach to the material. Howard was brought in to essentially reshoot most of the film, working under intense time pressure, with a cast and crew that had just experienced the traumatic disruption of losing their original directors. This situation would break many directors. The cast might be demoralized, unsure of the new direction. The crew might be exhausted and frustrated about redoing work they'd already completed. The studio would be anxious about the ballooning budget and whether the film could be salvaged. There would be second-guessing, doubt, and tension at every level. Howard handled it with characteristic professionalism. He didn't criticize Lord and Miller publicly. He didn't come in trying to prove he was better or smarter. Instead, he focused on the work. He met with the cast individually, discussed the characters and story, and reassured them that his goal was to make the best film possible while respecting what they'd already created. He worked extended hours, maintained an even temperament, and focused everyone's energy on moving forward rather than dwelling on what had happened. The film received mixed reviews and underperformed at the box office, but that wasn't due to any on-set drama or dysfunction. Howard delivered a professionally made film under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And significantly, none of the actors involved spoke negatively about working with him. Alden Ehrenreich, who had the unenviable task of playing a young Han Solo, praised Howard's approach and his ability to maintain morale during a chaotic production. This brings us to an important point about Ron Howard's reputation. In an industry where gossip travels at light speed, where angry actors give tell-all interviews, and where difficult working relationships become public knowledge almost immediately, the silence around Howard is deafening. Not because people don't talk about him, but because when they do talk about him, they consistently say the same things: prepared, professional, collaborative, respectful. Tom Hanks, who's worked with dozens of directors over his career, has repeatedly praised Howard's directing style. Russell Crowe, not known for suffering fools gladly, delivered one of his most nuanced performances under Howard's direction in A Beautiful Mind. Bryce Dallas Howard, Ron's daughter, has joked about constantly asking her father to cast her in his films, which he hasn't done for professional roles, suggesting he maintains clear boundaries between family relationships and professional decisions. In fact, This decision not to cast his daughter is revealing. Ron Howard has cast his brother Clint in 17 films, his father Rance in 15, and his mother Jean in 5. But Bryce Dallas Howard, despite being an accomplished actor with significant Hollywood credits including the Jurassic World franchise, has never had a speaking role in one of her father's films beyond childhood extra work. When asked about this, Bryce has said she very badly wants to work with her father professionally and even jokingly said, "Let's talk, dude, about finally getting cast." Why hasn't Ron cast his daughter? He's never fully explained, but the likely reason is professional boundaries. Casting family members in small roles or cameos is one thing. Casting your daughter in a significant role opens you up to accusations of nepotism, creates potential on-set complications if you need to give her critical direction, and might affect how other actors perceive the production's professionalism. By not casting Bryce, Howard maintains the same professional standards he applies to everyone else. It's actually a sign of respect, both for his daughter's independent career and for the integrity of his own projects. Let's discuss some of the specific actors Howard has worked with repeatedly, because these long-term professional relationships reveal something important about how he builds and maintains connections in Hollywood. Tom Hanks, as mentioned, has been a frequent collaborator. But so has Russell Crowe, despite Crowe's reputation as occasionally difficult. Cate Blanchett has worked with Howard multiple times. Kevin Bacon appeared in both Apollo 13 and Frost Nixon. These aren't accidents. When actors work with a director again, it's because the first experience was positive enough that they want to repeat it. Consider Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind and Cinderella Man. Crowe is an intense actor, someone who fully inhabits his roles and has strong opinions about his characters. Directors who try to micromanage Crowe or dismiss his input often clash with him. But Howard's collaborative approach gave Crowe the space to develop these complex characters while providing the structure and guidance needed to serve the overall film. The result was 2 of Crowe's finest performances, both earning him Academy Award nominations. Or look at Frost Nixon, Howard's 2008 film about the interviews between British journalist David Frost and disgraced President Richard Nixon. The film featured powerhouse performances from Frank Langella as Nixon and Michael Sheen as Frost, both reprising their roles from the stage play. These were actors who had lived with these characters for years in the theatrical production. They knew their characters intimately, had developed specific choices and interpretations. A less secure director might have felt threatened by this, might have tried to assert control by demanding significant changes to their performances. Howard instead recognized the value of what they'd already developed and worked to translate those stage performances to film while opening them up cinematically. The film earned 5 Academy Award nominations including Best Picture and Best Director. Frank Langella's performance as Nixon was particularly praised for its complexity and humanity, showing Nixon as deeply flawed but still recognizably human rather than as a simple villain. This kind of nuanced performance requires a director who trusts his actors, who creates an environment where they feel safe to be vulnerable, and who provides intelligent feedback without crushing their instincts. Now let's address something important. Being nice doesn't mean being weak, and Ron Howard's niceness shouldn't be confused with inability to make tough decisions or provide critical feedback. There's a difference between being respectful and being a pushover, between being collaborative and abdicating responsibility. Howard has spoken about how he provides actors with clear expectations from the casting process forward. When casting In the Heart of the Sea, he made sure every actor understood the physical demands of the role, the extreme diet and exercise regimen they'd need to follow, and the uncomfortable filming conditions they'd face. This wasn't optional information revealed later. It was part of the job description from the beginning. That's professional communication, making sure everyone knows what they're signing up for. Similarly, when Howard's mother Jean auditioned for a role in Apollo 13, he didn't give her the part just because she was his mother. He made her audition like everyone else, and he was prepared to not cast her if she wasn't right for the role. She ended up getting the part because her audition was strong, not because of family connections. This willingness to maintain professional standards even with family members shows the kind of integrity that earns respect in Hollywood. Howard has also demonstrated the ability to handle massive productions with complex logistics. Apollo 13 required creating convincing zero-gravity sequences, which Howard and his team achieved by filming in NASA's Vomit Comet, a plane that flies in parabolic arcs to create brief periods of weightlessness. This meant coordinating with NASA, managing a cast and crew working in genuinely uncomfortable conditions, and capturing usable footage during very limited windows of actual weightlessness. The technical complexity was enormous, but Howard managed it while keeping the production on schedule and maintaining focus on the human story. Rush required filming practical racing sequences with real Formula One cars at high speeds. The danger was real, the logistics were complex, and the margin for error was small. Yet Howard delivered spectacular racing sequences that felt authentic because they were largely real, not just CGI effects added in post-production. This required meticulous planning, clear communication with drivers and stunt coordinators, and the ability to make quick decisions when circumstances changed. The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and Inferno, based on Dan Brown's novels, required filming in historically significant locations including the Vatican, the Louvre, and various locations across Europe. Securing permissions to film in these locations, coordinating with local authorities, managing the logistics of major productions in crowded tourist areas, and respecting the cultural and religious significance of these sites required diplomatic skills beyond just directing talent. Let's talk about the business side of Howard's career, because his success isn't just about making good films. It's about making financially successful films while maintaining artistic integrity, a balance that eludes many directors. Howard co-founded Imagine Entertainment with producer Brian Grazer in 1986, and the company has produced dozens of films and television shows. This means Howard understands filmmaking not just as an art form but as a business, where budgets matter, where pleasing studio executives while satisfying audiences requires strategy, and where long-term relationships with financiers, distributors, and exhibitors affect what projects get greenlit. This business acumen helps explain Howard's consistent success. He understands what studios need: films delivered on time and on budget, marketing-friendly concepts, and respect for the investment they're making. He provides these things not by compromising his artistic vision but by being professional in his approach. When you're known as someone who delivers what you promise, who doesn't create costly on-set drama, and who maintains positive relationships with cast and crew, you get hired again. Studios trust you with bigger budgets, more ambitious projects, and more creative freedom. Consider the trajectory of Howard's career. He started with low-budget comedies and gradually earned the opportunity to direct more ambitious projects. By the time he made Apollo 13, he had proven himself reliable enough that Universal Pictures trusted him with a $52 million budget and a true story that needed to be handled respectfully. A Beautiful Mind had a $58 million budget and dealt with mental illness and complicated mathematics, not obviously commercial subject matter. Yet Howard's track record meant studios trusted him to make it work commercially while maintaining artistic integrity. This trust is capital in Hollywood. Directors who burn through that trust by going wildly over budget, creating on-set drama that delays productions, or feuding publicly with actors find their opportunities shrinking. Directors who build trust through consistent professionalism find doors opening, budgets increasing, and creative freedom expanding. Ron Howard has spent 55 years building that trust, and it shows in the range and ambition of projects he's been able to pursue. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Not every Ron Howard film has been a critical success. The Da Vinci Code received mixed reviews despite its box office success. Inferno was considered the weakest of the Robert Langdon trilogy. Solo, a Star Wars story, underperformed financially, though Howard can't be held responsible for circumstances beyond his control. Hillbilly Elegy, his 2020 film about J.D. Vance's memoir, was critically panned despite strong performances from Amy Adams and Glenn Close. But here's what's notable: even when his films are criticized, the criticism is almost always about creative choices, pacing, or storytelling decisions. It's not about unprofessional conduct, about creating toxic work environments, or about mistreating cast and crew. When Hillbilly Elegy was criticized, Amy Adams and Glenn Close didn't blame Howard or claim they were misled about the project. When Solo underperformed, the cast didn't give interviews complaining about the reshoot process or Howard's direction. This distinction matters. Many directors have made critically unsuccessful films. Stanley Kubrick made Eyes Wide Shut, which divided critics and audiences. Francis Ford Coppola made Jack, a critical and commercial failure. Martin Scorsese made New York, New York, which was initially poorly received. What separates professional directors from problematic ones isn't whether they ever make a weak film. It's how they conduct themselves through the process, how they treat the people they work with, and whether they maintain their integrity and relationships even when projects don't succeed as hoped. Ron Howard's consistency in maintaining professional relationships, even through less successful projects, is actually more impressive than if every film had been a masterpiece. It's easy to be gracious when everything's going well. It's much harder to maintain professionalism under pressure, when reviews are negative, when box office is disappointing, when studio executives are asking difficult questions. Yet throughout his career, Howard has maintained his composure, his professionalism, and his relationships. Let's talk about Howard's relationship with film criticism and media. Unlike some directors who feud publicly with critics, dismiss negative reviews, or lash out at journalists, Howard has maintained a measured, professional approach to criticism. He doesn't pretend every film is perfect. He doesn't attack critics who dislike his work. He engages with criticism thoughtfully, learns from it when valuable, and moves forward to the next project. When The Da Vinci Code received lukewarm reviews despite enormous box office success, Howard didn't go on a media tour attacking critics. He acknowledged the mixed reception, discussed his intentions with the project, and moved forward. When Hillbilly Elegy was heavily criticized, with some reviewers suggesting it mishandled sensitive class and cultural issues, Howard didn't become defensive or dismissive. He listened to the criticism and continued working. This mature approach to criticism is another aspect of Howard's professionalism that's worth noting. Many creative people struggle with criticism, taking it personally, becoming defensive, or lashing out at critics. Howard seems to understand that criticism, even harsh criticism, is part of the job. Not everyone will like every film. Not every creative choice will land with every viewer. That's not a personal attack. It's just the reality of making art for public consumption. This emotional maturity likely stems from his decades in the public eye. Remember, Ron Howard has been famous since he was 6 years old. He's spent 65 years with people watching him, judging him, commenting on his work. He's developed the thick skin and perspective necessary to handle criticism without losing his sense of self or his professionalism. That's a rare quality, and it contributes to his reputation as someone who's easy to work with even under pressure. Let's discuss Howard's approach to different genres, because his versatility is another notable aspect of his career. He's made comedies like Splash and Night Shift. He's made intense dramas like A Beautiful Mind and Frost Nixon. He's made action-adventure films like the Da Vinci Code series. He's made historical dramas like Cinderella Man and Apollo 13. He's made racing films like Rush, maritime adventures like In the Heart of the Sea, and westerns like The Missing. He even made a fantasy film with Willow in 1988. This genre versatility requires different skills and sensibilities. Comedy requires understanding timing and performance rhythms. Drama requires emotional depth and nuance. Action requires managing complex choreography and maintaining spatial clarity. Historical films require research and respect for real events. Yet Howard has demonstrated competence across all these genres, suggesting an ability to adapt his approach while maintaining his core directing philosophy. What remains consistent across genres is Howard's focus on character and story. Whether he's directing a Formula One racing drama or a biographical film about a mathematician, Howard keeps the human story at the center. The racing in Rush is spectacular, but the film is really about the psychology of competition and the different philosophies James Hunt and Niki Lauda brought to their rivalry. Apollo 13 has incredible technical sequences, but it's fundamentally about courage, ingenuity, and teamwork under life-threatening pressure. A Beautiful Mind deals with complex mathematics, but the heart of the film is John Nash's struggle with schizophrenia and his wife's unwavering support. This character-focused approach serves Howard well across genres because it gives audiences an emotional anchor regardless of the subject matter. Even viewers who know nothing about Formula One racing can connect with Rush because it's about recognizable human drives, ambition, rivalry, the desire to prove yourself, the question of what risks are worth taking to achieve greatness. Even viewers who don't understand higher mathematics can connect with a beautiful mind because everyone understands the terror of losing your grip on reality and the power of love to sustain us through darkness. Now let's talk about Howard's legacy and influence on contemporary filmmaking. He represents a particular approach to directing that sometimes gets overlooked in discussions of auteur filmmakers. He's not a visionary stylist like Wes Anderson or Quentin Tarantino, whose films are immediately recognizable by their visual signatures. He's not a provocateur like Lars von Trier or Gaspar Noé, whose films deliberately challenge and sometimes alienate audiences. He's a craftsman in the best sense of the word, someone who masters the technical and emotional tools of filmmaking and uses them in service of story and character. This craftsmanship approach has influenced many directors who came after him. Directors who prioritize story over style, who create environments where actors can do their best work, who maintain professional sets and deliver films on time and on budget. These aren't the directors who typically get celebrated in film criticism circles, where the focus often lands on bold stylistic choices and challenging experimental work. But they're the directors who keep the film industry functioning, who create the movies that most audiences actually watch, and who build sustainable careers that span decades. Ron Howard has also influenced the industry through his production company, Imagine Entertainment. The company has produced not just Howard's own films but also numerous television shows including Arrested Development, 24, Friday Night Lights, and Empire. Through this production work, Howard has provided opportunities for other directors, writers, and actors, contributing to the careers of countless entertainment professionals beyond just those who work on his own films as director. His influence extends to how child actors are treated and how their careers are managed. Howard's own successful transition from child actor to adult actor to director provides a roadmap that many former child actors have tried to follow, with varying degrees of success. His willingness to speak about the importance of stable family support, education, and maintaining perspective on fame has contributed to discussions about how to protect child performers from exploitation and the psychological damage that has affected so many young actors. When Jake Lloyd, who played young Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars, Episode I, The Phantom Menace, was only 9 years old, Newsweek published an article criticizing his performance. Ron Howard, who had no direct connection to the film or the actor, wrote a letter to Newsweek defending Lloyd and criticizing the magazine for attacking a child's performance. This defense of a young actor from unfair criticism, despite having no personal stake in the situation, shows Howard's character and his commitment to protecting young performers in an industry that often exploits them. Let's also discuss what Howard represents in terms of Hollywood's evolution. He started in the industry in 1960, when the studio system was still dominant, when television was still finding its voice, and when the kinds of personal filmmaking that would emerge in the 1970s hadn't yet arrived. He came of age professionally during the 1970s New Hollywood era, when directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and Steven Spielberg revolutionized American filmmaking. He built his directing career during the blockbuster era of the 1980s and 1990s. He adapted to the franchise and cinematic universe era of the 2000s and 2010s, directing Solo, a Star Wars story when he was already in his 60s. This span of experience across multiple eras of Hollywood history gives Howard a unique perspective. He's worked in multiple technological paradigms, from purely analog filmmaking to fully digital production. He's navigated different financial models, from mid-budget studio films that have largely disappeared to tentpole franchises and streaming productions. He's adapted to changing audience expectations, from the character-driven films of the 1970s to the spectacle-driven blockbusters of contemporary cinema. Yet through all these changes, Howard has maintained his core approach: respect for collaborators, focus on story and character, professional conduct, and delivery of quality work on schedule and on budget. This consistency across changing circumstances suggests that what Howard represents isn't tied to any particular era or style of filmmaking. It's a fundamental approach to creative collaboration that transcends specific technological or cultural moments. As Howard enters his 70s, his career provides a case study in sustainable success in a notoriously unsustainable industry. Most directors don't maintain active careers for 50-plus years. Many burn out, either from the stress of the work or from destroying relationships that make it difficult to get hired. Others become trapped by their own success, unable to get financing for anything that isn't similar to their previous hits. Still others become rigid in their approach, unable to adapt to changing technologies and audience expectations. Howard has avoided all these pitfalls. He continues to work regularly, directing major productions and developing new projects. His relationships throughout the industry remain strong, giving him access to top talent both in front of and behind the camera. He's adapted to new technologies and new distribution models, directing for streaming services as well as traditional theatrical releases. And he's maintained his enthusiasm for filmmaking, continuing to approach projects with energy and curiosity rather than jaded cynicism. What lessons can we draw from Ron Howard's career? First, that professionalism matters. Being known as someone who shows up prepared, treats people respectfully, and delivers quality work creates opportunities and sustains careers. Second, that versatility is valuable. Howard's willingness to work across genres has given him more opportunities than if he'd insisted on only making one type of film. Third, that maintaining relationships is crucial in a collaborative industry. The directors who succeed long-term are those who leave people wanting to work with them again. Fourth, that ego management is essential. Howard's ability to check his ego, to listen to others' ideas, to give credit to collaborators, and to handle criticism maturely has served him better than defensive arrogance would have. Fifth, that business sense supports artistic goals. Understanding the financial realities of filmmaking doesn't mean compromising artistic vision. It means being strategic about which battles to fight and how to structure projects so that artistic ambitions and financial realities align rather than conflict. Sixth, that character and story are timeless. Visual style changes, technology evolves, audience preferences shift, but the fundamental human need for compelling characters and meaningful stories remains constant. Howard's consistent focus on these elements has kept his work relevant across decades of industry change. And finally, that being nice isn't weakness. It's a strategic advantage that builds social capital, creates collaborative environments where people do their best work, and constructs a reputation that opens doors throughout a career. Ron Howard's story also reminds us that Hollywood success doesn't require dysfunction, that you don't need to be a tyrant to get great performances, and that professionalism and respect can be just as powerful as fear and intimidation. In an industry filled with stories of abuse, exploitation, and toxic behavior, Howard's decades of positive relationships stand out. They prove that there's another way to make films, one that doesn't leave a trail of damaged people and burned bridges. This matters not just for Howard's legacy but for the future of the film industry. Young filmmakers entering the industry need role models who demonstrate that success doesn't require sacrificing your integrity or treating people badly. Actors need to know that they can maintain boundaries, demand respect, and work in environments that support rather than abuse them. Production crews need to understand that they deserve professional working conditions regardless of how demanding the creative vision. Ron Howard represents what sustainable, ethical success in Hollywood can look like. Not perfect, no one is perfect, but consistently professional, consistently respectful, consistently focused on the work rather than ego and drama. In an industry that often celebrates and mythologizes difficult personalities, Howard's example of achieving massive success while being, by all accounts, a genuinely decent person deserves more attention and celebration. As we look at Howard's body of work, from O.P. Taylor to Apollo 13 to A Beautiful Mind and beyond, we see not just a collection of films but a case study in how to build and maintain a career through integrity, professionalism, and respect. We see someone who learned from mentors like Andy Griffith, who avoided the pitfalls that destroy so many child actors, who made the transition from actor to director successfully, who adapted to changing industry circumstances, and who built relationships that have sustained him through decades of work. When future film historians look back at early 21st century Hollywood, Ron Howard will likely be remembered as a skilled craftsman who made commercially successful films across multiple genres while maintaining an impeccable professional reputation. That might not sound as exciting as being remembered as a tormented genius or a revolutionary visionary. But for anyone actually interested in sustainable creative work, in building a career that lasts, in creating environments where people do their best work, Ron Howard's example is worth studying. The truth about Ron Howard is more interesting than any fabricated feuds or made-up controversies could ever be. He's proven that you can achieve the highest levels of success in Hollywood while treating people decently, that professionalism and preparation can overcome almost any challenge, and that sustainable success comes from building relationships rather than burning bridges. In an industry filled with cautionary tales and tragic endings, Ron Howard's story is something rarer and more valuable. A success story that's genuinely positive, a career that's genuinely admirable, and a legacy that demonstrates what's possible when talent combines with character.